The ward was quiet the way military hospitals are always quiet, not peaceful, but held, like something was always about to happen and hadn't yet. Colonel Marcus Hale walked the corridor at 11 minutes past 9. He was not there for any particular reason that he would have written in a report. Routine visit. Oversight. The kind of thing senior officers do when they cannot sleep and do not want to admit it. He kept his hands behind his back and his pace unhurried, and the nurses who passed him nodded without breaking stride. He had done this walk 100 times. The lighting was the same yellow it always was. The smell of antiseptic sat in the air the way it always did. His boots made the same sound on the same floor. He stopped at Bay 7. The patient there was a young corporal recovering from a training injury, nothing serious. Hale had reviewed the case files that afternoon, and there was nothing in Bay 7 that required his attention. But he stopped there anyway, and he looked at the corporal, and the corporal was asleep. The nurse adjusting the IV line at the bedside did not look up immediately. She was focused on what her hands were doing, which was the right thing to be. She wore the rank of specialist on her uniform. Her name tape read, Reyes. She had dark hair pulled back, and the kind of stillness that comes from doing precise work for a long time. Hale watched her for a moment. He was about to move on. She looked up, and then, in a voice that was completely ordinary, the way you might confirm a patient's allergy, or read a dosage aloud to yourself, she said it. Outrigger. One word. Hale did not move. She had already looked back down at the IV line. Her hands continued their work. She had not said it to him. Not exactly. It had come out the way things come out when a person's mind is partly elsewhere, and a word surfaces without ceremony. But it was the word. It was his word, and it had come from her mouth, as though she had always known it. He put his hand on the bed rail. Not because he needed to, because his body made a quiet decision before his mind could. Outrigger was his call sign. It had been assigned during a period of his career that existed in files that most people with high clearance had never seen. It was not a name used in any current operation. It was not written on anything accessible to the staff of this hospital. It had not been spoken aloud, to his knowledge, in 4 years. Not since the operation. The one that ended the way it ended. The one nobody discussed anymore. Not at debrief, not over drinks, not in the careful and circular conversations he sometimes had with the few men who had been there. She said it like it was his first name. He stood there for 3 seconds. He counted them without meaning to. The IV line dripped. The corporal breathed slowly in his sleep. Somewhere down the corridor a cart rolled and a door opened and closed. Hale's eyes went to the IV line Reyes had just finished adjusting. He looked at it. He did not know why he was looking at it. It was just something to look at while his brain did something it had not done in a very long time. Went absolutely still and cold at the center, the way it did when something did not fit, and the wrongness of that thing had not yet been fully calculated. He did not ask her to repeat it. He did not ask her what she meant. He did not say anything. He nodded once at the sleeping corporal, the way a man checks on someone and finds them fine, and he walked out of Bay 7 and continued down the corridor at the same unhurried pace. At the end of the corridor, he turned the corner. He was now out of the sightline of the ward. He stopped walking. His phone was already in his hand. He scrolled to a number that was not saved under a real name. The contact was listed as P. Garrett, which was not the man's name, but the man would answer. It rang twice. "I need a full pull," Hale said quietly. "Personnel file, Specialist Diana Reyes, currently posted to Ward 7, this installation. I need it in the morning." He listened to the acknowledgement on the other end. He put the phone in his pocket. He stood in the empty corridor for a moment longer, and then he walked back to his office, and he did not sleep that night. He did not tell himself there was nothing to worry about. He had been in this work too long for that kind of comfort. He sat at his desk, and he looked at the wall, and he thought about the words she had said, and the way she had said it, and the fact that she had not watched him after she said it. That last part bothered him most. A person who says something by accident checks to see if anyone heard. She had not checked. She had kept her eyes on the IV line, which meant either she did not realize she had said it, or she had said it on purpose and already knew how he would respond. Both answers were wrong. They were wrong in different directions, but they were both wrong. and he needed to know which kind of wrong he was dealing with before he spoke to anyone else about it. He opened his desk drawer. He took out a notepad and wrote nothing on it. He put the pen down. Outside, the installation was quiet. The generators hummed. A vehicle crossed the far end of the compound with its lights on and then disappeared. Hale had spent 31 years in the Army. He had been in rooms where the air itself told you something was wrong before any of the people in the room said a word. He had learned to trust that feeling early, and he had never stopped trusting it. It had kept him alive in places where alive was not the expected outcome. The feeling he had now, sitting in his office at 9:45 at night, was not fear. It was something quieter and more precise than fear. It was recognition. Something was here. Something had found him, or found him first, or been waiting for him to find it. He did not know which, but the word had been in that room, in that woman's voice, with exactly the tone of someone who had always known it was his. He did not sleep. At 6 in the morning, his phone showed a message from P. Garrett, 3 words, "File is ready." He read the file before he did anything else, before coffee, before the day began. Specialist Diana Reyes, age 32, Bachelor of Science in Nursing from a state university in Ohio. Enlisted 4 years ago. Clean service record. 2 previous postings, both unremarkable. No disciplinary notes. No awards, no incidents, no gaps. Excellent performance reviews. Described by supervisors as professional. Calm under pressure, detail-oriented. He read it twice. It was a fine record. It was a complete record. Every box filled, every date accounted for, every posting logical in sequence. He had seen files built this way before, not by soldiers building a career, by people whose actual history could not be written down. The architecture was unmistakable once you had seen it, not the content. The content was fine. It was the structure. Real service records have small imperfections. A supervisor who writes the same phrase 2 evaluations in a row. A training delay that pushes a certification date. A posting that doesn't quite line up with the unit rotation. Reyes's file had none of that. It was smooth in the way that only files assembled by careful hands are smooth. Every seam hidden. Every date deliberate. He went to the original screening records. These were older, from her enlistment processing. They were scanned documents, low resolution, some of them partially marked up with the kind of administrative redactions that happen when files are reviewed for security purposes. He almost passed the page. He didn't. There was a single line in the middle of the 3rd page, beneath a section heading about prior employment verification. The line was blacked out, completely. A thick horizontal bar of redaction that removed whatever had originally been there. But the person who had done the redaction had been slightly imprecise. On the right edge of the bar, where the black marker had not quite covered the full width of the line, 2 letters and a partial number were visible. He leaned forward. The letters were familiar, not just familiar, they were specific. They were the first 2 letters of a unit designation that he had served under for 3 years, a unit that had been decommissioned, a unit whose name did not appear in any public documentation, and whose connection to any individual service member was itself considered sensitive. His old unit. He sat back in his chair. He set the file on his desk, face down. He did not flip it back over. He needed a moment in which the information was not in front of his eyes. Specialist Diana Reyes had a connection to his old unit. It had been redacted. Someone had tried to remove it. They had almost succeeded. And now she was here, in his installation, in the ward he walked at night, saying his call sign in a voice that knew exactly what the word meant. He did not report this. Not up the chain. Not to anyone with rank above his own. Not yet. He needed to understand what he was looking at before he handed it to someone else. He had learned that lesson the hard way, in a way he still did not talk about. He picked up his coffee. It had gone cold. He drank it anyway, and he went back to the ward. She was there. Same section of the floor, different bay, same focused quality of attention. She was reviewing a chart when he entered, and she did not look up until he was close enough that it would have been strange not to. "Colonel," she said, the way any specialist addresses a colonel, professionally, evenly. "Reyes," he said. He asked her 2 routine questions about the ward. She answered them correctly, without hesitation, without any change in her expression that he could identify. She was good. He recognized that, whatever she was good at this. He started to move to the next bay, and then, very quietly, he said it, the way she had said it the night before, in passing, like a question that had forgotten its question mark. Outrigger. She kept writing on her clipboard. That was the answer. That was the whole answer. A person who has never heard the word before stops writing. A person who has heard it before and is not expecting it to be thrown back at them also stops writing. The only person who keeps writing is a person who knew it was coming, a person who has been waiting for this exact moment and has already decided how she will respond to it. She turned to the next page of the chart. She clicked her pen, and she said, without looking at him, in the same calm and ordinary voice, "You should ask your daughter." Then she walked to the next bay. He was holding his clipboard. He did not know when he had picked it up. It was in his hands and he was gripping it, and he made himself loosen his grip one finger at a time. He had one daughter. Her name was Carla. She had been declared a casualty of a collapsed operation 3 years ago. He had received the notification in his office, from a man he trusted, with documentation that he had read and signed and filed and tried not to carry with him everywhere he went, with varying success. He looked at the bay where Reyes had been standing. She was already across the room, moving efficiently, professionally, as though she had said nothing to him at all. His clipboard was still in his hands. He set it down on the nearest surface. He walked out of the ward. He walked to his vehicle. He sat in the driver's seat and he did not start the engine for a long time, and the morning light came through the windshield and sat on the dash, and he thought about his daughter's name, and the way a nurse he did not know had just said something no one on earth should have been able to say. "You should ask your daughter." He started the engine. He had 11 days of leave saved up. He had never taken them. He decided, sitting in that car in that parking lot in that ordinary morning light, that he was going to use every single one of them. He was going to find out what Diana Reyes knew. And he was going to find his daughter. The first 3 days were archives, not the kind with clean access and proper request forms. Those would leave traces, and he was not ready to leave traces. He worked laterally, through contacts who owed him things, through documents that technically existed in systems he technically still had credentials for. He pulled field hospital logs from the conflict zone where Carla's unit had been deployed. He cross-referenced them against a non-official cover clinic that had operated in the same region under a humanitarian organization's name. The clinic appeared in 2 documents and was absent from 17 others, which was itself a kind of information. On the 4th day he found a name. It appeared once, in an asset log that had been decommissioned and should, by all standard procedure, have been fully expunged. The log was from a network, not official, not sanctioned, not the kind of thing that came with documentation or budget lines or oversight, the kind of network that forms when official channels have failed and people on the ground make decisions that do not appear in any report. The name in the log was a medical professional, field certified, deployed under non-official cover. The name was not Diana Reyes, but the description of her work matched. The location matched, the dates matched, and at the bottom of the entry, in the way that careful people sometimes make small mistakes, there was a reference code. He had seen that code format before, once, in a very specific context. It was the same format used by his old unit. On the 7th day, he found the photograph. It was in a digital file that existed on a server that should not have been accessible to him from a personal device on a non-secure connection. He accessed it anyway, through a method he would not have explained to anyone with less than his own clearance. The file contained documentation from a recovery safe house, patient records, stripped of names per protocol, but with dates and case numbers intact. He matched the case number to a date. He matched the date to a location report. He matched the location to the collapsed operation. And then he opened the photograph. It was timestamped 14 months ago. His daughter was sitting upright in a hospital bed. She was thin, but she was upright, and she was smiling the smile he had not seen in 3 years. Not the polished one she used in photographs, but the real one, the crooked one, the one she got from her mother. Standing beside her, in plain scrubs, with her hand resting on the bed rail, was Diana Reyes. He turned the photograph face down on the desk without looking away from it, which was not logical. He turned it over anyway. He needed the image to stop being in front of his eyes. Carla was alive. She had been alive for at least 14 months, possibly longer. She had been recovered by an unauthorized network operating outside official channels, cared for by a woman who then, 14 months later, appeared at his installation under a file too clean to be real, and said his call sign to him in a room where he happened to be standing. Not happened. She had known he walked that ward. She had been waiting. She had chosen the word the way a person chooses a key, precisely, deliberately, because it was the one thing that would open the right door without alerting anyone else in the building. He picked up his phone. His hand was steady. He noticed that his hand was steady, and he found this faintly strange, given what was in his chest at that moment. He called the number he had been building toward for 11 days, the number at the end of the chain, the contact whose name appeared, in a carefully indirect way, in the decommissioned asset log, a woman named Claire. She answered on the second ring. He said 3 words. She said nothing for a moment, and then gave him an address. He wrote it down. He closed the file. He drove to the address that afternoon. It was a small facility, not military, not official, the kind of place that looks like a private medical center and is technically registered as one and functions as something else entirely. A woman at the front desk did not ask him for identification. She led him down a hallway. She opened a door. His daughter was sitting in a chair by the window. She looked up when the door opened, and for a moment neither of them moved, and the room held everything. 3 years of a specific kind of grief. 3 years of a specific kind of hope that he had refused to let himself have. And now this. Carla. Real. Here. In a chair by a window with afternoon light on her face. Diana Reyes was standing near the wall. She looked at him once, and then she stepped out of the room and closed the door behind her. He crossed the room in 4 steps. He sat in the chair across from his daughter. He looked at her face. She looked at his. She said, "I kept trying to find a way to tell you." He said, "I know." He did not know. He said it because there were things that needed to come later, in their own time, in a different kind of conversation. Why and how long, and who knew, and what happened. And none of those things were what the room needed right now. Right now the room needed him to sit across from his daughter and be present in it. And he was. Between them, on the small table, was a mug of hospital coffee. It had been poured a while ago and had gone cold. Neither of them touched it. He would ask the questions later. He would file nothing, report nothing about Reyes, close the folder, leave it where it sat. Whatever network had kept his daughter alive had earned that. Whatever Diana Reyes had carried, and for how long, was not something he was going to hand to anyone with a form and a pen. He sat with his daughter and they talked about small things. Her room, the food, a television series she had started watching, whether the coffee machine down the hall made anything drinkable. He told her about the ward, about the installation, about the drive over, and the way the light had been coming through the trees on the highway. He did not cry, neither did she. They both understood that there was a kind of feeling too large to perform, and that sitting together in a room and talking about nothing was the only honest way to hold it. The coffee cooled further between them. He did not pick it up. He did not need to. He was already exactly where he needed to be, and he was going to stay there for as long as she would let him.